Hello again, and welcome to today's podcast, Hope in the Pipeline. And today's a special podcast where I have a guest, Miss Jessica Watson, our Senior Coordinator with Preferred Research Partners. Jessica, today is our follow-up podcast from last time when I talked about gastroparesis. So I've invited you here today to tell us a little bit about what it's like to be in a clinical trial, in particular a gastroparesis trial. And I'm sure our listeners are looking forward to hearing some of this information, because I think that for some people who think about volunteering to participate in a clinical trial, it can be a little bit scary proposition for them. And we want to take the scariness out of it and let them know that we're their partner going through the process. So welcome. And I thought we would begin today by having you introduce yourself.
I'm Jessica Watson. Been in Arkansas all my life. For 13 years, I've been a coordinator at PRP. Before that, I had a degree as a legal assistant, and I like healthcare a lot better. I like being able to work with the patients. Love our team at PRP.
Tell us a little bit about what your current role is at PRP. It's not just being a coordinator. You have other roles as well, administratively and marketing and that within PRP. And then if you'll share with folks some of your exciting education plans for the future.
Okay. Yes. Other than being a coordinator at PRP, I do a lot of kind of scouring for new opportunities for new clinical trials. A lot of networking with pharmaceutical companies and the kind of the liaisons between research sites and pharmaceutical companies. Because we're always looking for new opportunities. The more we can get involved with, the more we can offer to our patients. So I do a lot of that. We get busier and busier every year, and that's a good thing. Moving forward, as I am coordinating trials at PRP, I'm also attending school and want to get my bachelor's as a nurse. I would like to continue on, just go for my doctorate. Why not just keep going, go all the way, because that brings even more opportunity ultimately to our patients. It helps, it helps us all, I think, if we can expand, and I'd like to be a part of that expansion.
Great. Well, we're all excited about that for sure. You and I spend a lot of time on development of and pursuing leads for new studies. We're looking at all kinds of different studies all the time. Lately, we've been focusing on trying to get some Alzheimer's trials and some other neurology type trials and autism trials. And we take a look at pick and choose kind of what mental health trials we're looking at. We may have some coming up for PTSD. So it's an ongoing and exciting effort, and your experience is very much appreciated with that process for sure. And then, gosh, you've got nurse practitioner coming up, and not just that, but a doctor level nurse practitioner. And have you thought about a specialty within the nurse practitioner area at this point?
Yeah, I think I have a soft spot for geriatrics. The Alzheimer's is very interesting to me to know that stems probably from grandparents, even when I was younger, watching those changes. I want to be a part of helping.
Sure. I don't know too many people that haven't had someone in their family touched by Alzheimer's. It runs in my family. Parkinson's disease runs in my family as well, too. So those are efforts near and dear to my heart. And boy, that's another thing that excited about with Preferred Research Partners is we're looking at developing Alzheimer's Infusion Center and Neurology Infusion Center. So many of the new drugs for Alzheimer's that are coming out seem to require infusion. They're larger drugs that need to be infused directly into blood vessels and avoid the stomach so that they can get absorbed and they can cross the blood-brain barrier into the brain and have their effect. So we're excited about that new area. You've been a coordinator now for 13 years. You must like it.
I think
you
so.
You put up with me during that time. What is it that you really like about that job position and the experience of working with patients?
It's the patients themselves. That's the best part, just getting to interact with them, knowing that I'm in some way helping, them, even if indirectly down the road, getting to know them, we get to know them over a long period of time. Sometimes we see the same patients over years, that are still struggling with a condition that we can maybe, help them and others like them. We get to know them. We get to know their families, their story, and that's the best part, being able to just be one-on-one with them. Our team at PRP would be, we've probably got the best team, I would say. We work very well together, and that shows. I think our patients see that and that they appreciate that. There's a lot to be said for the size of our team, even though we're growing, but we still have that, small town feel, like a family. I think those two things keep me happy, keep me going. You
mentioned working with some of our volunteer participants, patients or subjects, as we call them in research. And that definitely has been one thing that has been fun and rewarding is we have somebody come in and, they may have been frustrated for years working with their doc. Not that their doc hasn't made the effort to help them, but there just hasn't been a compound out there to help them. And they come in and they get on a research medication and boy, all of a sudden they come back in smiling and it's a different personality. And you're like, oh, this has been really nice for them. And so that definitely is a rewarding part of that. And you have in particular been our primary gastrointestinal clinical trial coordinator and have gotten to see that experience with folks who've had some chronic GI problems. And so maybe you can speak to a favorite subject or two without mentioning names as far as their experience goes in terms of what the outcome for them has been.
Right. One of them always comes to mind. One of the patients that had a good experience, it was life-changing for her because the gastroparesis, there's a range of severity, a lot of people just are debilitated by it. And it was really affecting her job. There are subjects that, have to be at work, can't call into work, 3 times a week because they're sick. It was life-changing for her. It changed her outlook on a lot of things. Her job, she was an ER nurse, actually, the one that I'm thinking of, and it allowed her to be able to do her job to take care of her patients in the hospital. There have been many stories like that, especially in gastroparesis trials, because it is so debilitating for a number of patients. But yeah, when you see these patients be able to live their life and be able to say, I had a good day, and you can see it happening, when they're reporting symptoms and reporting less and less, you can watch it happening, and that we're on to something good here. Keep at it, and hopefully that will be available for everyone one day soon.
Yeah, that's our hope and that's our purpose is to try and make new medications and treatments available to help a large number of people. And, that speaks to kind of my personal process as well. I've been neuropsychiatrist for years, inpatient, outpatient work, adults, kids, geriatric, substance abuse doc. I've been sleep medicine doc for a number of years. And, that field, particularly when it first started, was very rewarding in terms of helping people from that standpoint. And at this stage in my career, that's certainly my motivation. And I think all of our motivation of preferred research partners is to try to help get some of these medications developed and to touch a large number of people across the United States and the world by doing that. And it's a rewarding process, and I can see that in your face as you talk about it from that standpoint.
It is.
So very nice. So we've touched on gastroparesis. For those of you just tuning in, is delayed emptying of the stomach contents into the small intestine, both food and liquids, when there is no obstruction causing the delayed emptying. The emptying is due to a malfunction of the nerves or muscle structure of the stomach. And so I talked in my last podcast, we talked about some tests that some clinical trials and our local gastroenterologists use to help diagnose that. And so one of those is the Cairn 13C spirulina gastric emptying breath test, if I can remember and get all that out. So which I guess is shortened to GEBT. And so you have a lot of experience with that test, more than what I do from that standpoint. So could you take our listeners today through what is involved in a GEB test?
Sure. Specifically in research trials for years now, for gastroparesis trials, we've used this breath test, and it's just as accurate as what you would do in a hospital setting as an outpatient. A lot of clinics can send you over to the radiology department and have this test done. There's a more convenient way these days by these breath test kits. It's the same concept, but we're able to do those right there in our clinic for our gastroparesis trials. And it's pretty simple. It's a 4-hour appointment with me. It will be you arrive fasting after an 8-hour fast as the patient, so nothing to eat or drink. That morning, we get started with checking for your blood sugar amounts before we do the test, before you eat the meal that is provided within the test and go forward with the test. We want to make sure that your blood glucose is within a normal range. If it's too high, and this is more along the lines with diabetic gastroparesis, but even with other causes of gastroparesis, we want to rule out that the glucose is too high because it can affect the absorption of the meal and skew the results. So over this 4-hour period of time, you start out eating a light breakfast type meal. It's an egg mixture that has a traceable substance in it, like you've mentioned before. There are probably, I think, 6 saltine crackers. Maybe the better part of the meal is the crackers. And then they get only about 6 ounces of water to eat. So between the eggs, the crackers, and the water, that is what is intended to only be in your stomach. Nothing before that, nothing after that for the 4 hours. After that meal, they are blowing into glass tubes, small glass tubes. You blow through a straw into the tubes, and it fills up with the condensation of your breath. And these are done at certain time points over that 4 hours. So there are like at 45 minutes after you've eaten the meal, at 90 minutes after you've eaten the meal, it kind of spreads out until 4 hours. You blow into these tubes. We collect the condensation from your breath, send that off to the lab, which is at Cairn Diagnostics, who invented this breath test kit. They can detect the spirulina that's in the egg mixture by the condensation in your breath. They can tell how much of that meal is still in your belly at those certain time points, because theoretically there should only be a certain percentage of a meal after, say, 2 hours,
I think last time, Jess, I mentioned about 60% of a meal, somewhere around there, ought to be out of the stomach after 2 hours. Yeah.
Right. So with gastroparesis, many times it's a lot more than that. And even at 4 hours, 3 hours and 4 hours, there's a lot of that meal still sitting there, which is what causes all those symptoms. And so that can kind of confirm or not that diagnosis. It's an eligibility piece in these trials. It tells us whether or not this patient can continue on. If they do, in fact, have confirmed delayed emptying, sometimes, it's not. And it may not be that you don't necessarily have gastroparesis, but some people have good days and bad days. Some people have nothing but bad days. So it's kind of a timing issue, and we don't see a lot of patients that have very mild gastroparesis. Most of ours, they know they have it. That's why they're looking for an alternative or something, because there's not a lot of options out there. Yep. So we're trying to fix that.
What do they do during those 4 hours? Do they have to be still or lay down, or they're free to work on their computer?
They're free to walk around. There are a couple of restrictions, so you can't eat anything or drink anything other than that meal at the beginning. They don't want any smoking or vaping, because that can also skew the results in your breath.
Slow things down. Yeah.
Right. Other than that, it's pretty simple. They can, bring something to occupy their time, or we could sit and talk for 4 hours.
They could work on their laptop, though. Actually remotely. If
that's right. They can get a lot of things done right there.
So how quickly do those results come back?
Cairn receives those in 2 days, and about a day to 2 days later, I have results. And Dr. Baber, our gastroenterologist, looks over those and assesses everything. They're pretty accurate tests. And you can, after years of doing these tests, you can kind of pinpoint, because the meal is, like any meal, difficult for some patients to complete,
they're visibly uncomfortable.
They are visibly uncomfortable. So a lot of our patients are confirmed by these tests. Even if they've been confirmed before by, say, their gastroenterologist sent them to the radiology department for a scintigraphy. Some of our trials require the test anyways to keep it consistent between all patients.
So that every patient in the trial has failed the same test, so to speak, before they participate. Yeah.
Right.
So I always want consistency in clinical trials so that everybody, same blood work, same test, and that produces better, more reliable results. So after they have this breath test, and let's say that they fail it, so to speak, which demonstrates they have gastroparesis, then they would proceed with the remainder of the clinical trial at that point.
Correct.
Right? Some of the gastroparesis trials, as I recall, also, and not just gastroparesis trials, but a number of our gastrointestinal trials, whether it's for ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease or reflux, request that the volunteer participants undergo an endoscopy. Right? So could you tell our listeners today what is an endoscopy, and when they're in a clinical trial at Preferred Research Partners, where is it done at? How's it set up? What's the prep? All sorts of good information. Right.
So with various trials, let's say we have an ulcerative colitis trial that's located in your colon. We may need to do a colonoscopy in the beginning of the trial to confirm that there is actual diagnosis there. So that's something that I would set up with the patient, and we do those at the endoscopy center. We send our patients over there. I go with them for the procedure.
University
that is on
Avenue?
North University Avenue, so it's not far from our location, centrally located. They see a lot of patients over there, and Dr. Baber does his procedures over there, along with other doctors. They have a great team of nurses. But I would set
Dr.
that
Brown
up.
as well.
Dr. Brown,
one of our gastroenterologists.
he works on our GI trials. He also does procedures there. I set that up with the endoscopy center, and we schedule that. The patient is, educated on what's going to take place, which will be, let's say for a colonoscopy, they're going to go to that appointment fasting. Don't want anything in your belly, because the anesthesia team is going to give a light sedative to make it more comfortable. They lie you down in a bed, they roll you in, and I go with you, and Dr. Baber is there, and he has a machine that has a scope. It's a thin, long, flexible tube with a light and a camera on the end of it. It's not as scary as everyone thinks. The worst part about a colonoscopy is typically preparing for the colonoscopy. So in order to clear out your contents of your belly, there are a number of methods to do that with like laxative purposes. And that's the worst part. It takes probably 3 minutes to conduct a colonoscopy where there are no, issues or biopsies being taken or anything. Some of our trials will require biopsies, but that's, educated ahead of time. And in a trial like ulcerative colitis, these participants have probably had a number of colonoscopies. But for patients that have not ever had any type of endoscopy, we let them know what to expect.
It can be kind of a great quick nap.
It is a great nap.
Very restful.
It is.
So,
it doesn't last long enough.
Had my own procedure before, So for ulcerative colitis trial, we're looking at a colonoscopy, but for example, for the gastroparesis trial, there's more than one type of endoscopy. Endoscopy refers to a tube with a camera. So for the gastroparesis trial, what type of endoscopy would be looking at there?
So we would do a an upper GI or an EGD, which is just the abbreviation for esophagogastroduodenoscopy.
So the tube would go down the throat.
Goes down here.
Okay.
So we're looking down your esophagus and we're looking into your stomach. And depending on what Dr. Baber or any other GI doc wants to look at, he can go as far as he needs to go or not. So let's say for reflux disease, for GERD, they're looking all the way down. And for gastroparesis, they want to look into your stomach. If you've come in fasting and you haven't eaten since the night before, that's several hours and that food should not be sitting in your stomach. But if it is, he can see that. And that is a really good indication that that's a patient with gastroparesis. Yeah. For the reflux or, ulcers, the reflux can cause ulcers in your esophagus and we want to see that. And depending on the trial and what they are requiring, we may need biopsies or not. But yeah, it's a great way to see what's going on inside. And then right then, it's quick, it's effective, and now you know what you're dealing with. From the research standpoint, I have those results now, and I know that you are either eligible or not eligible for a trial. If you're not, for whatever reason, Dr. Baber's available to kind of guide you from that point on if the research study is not a good fit for you. Right. If you are, then we continue to go forward with assessments and visits and hopefully to the treatment period and get some relief.
So endoscopy, we don't want to see any ulcers.
No.
We don't want to see any obstructions that might be causing the gastroparesis. That would not be good. But you keep mentioning another word that I'm thinking, which is biopsy.
Biopsies.
But surprisingly, and you can share your experience with it, really it's a pretty painless procedure from that standpoint. People don't wake up from the endoscopy, either upper or lower endoscopy, saying, the biopsy place hurts. Right. It's painless.
It's internal and very small pieces of tissue.
Tiny.
That are just basically clipped out of the wall of, say, your colon or your esophagus. He's got a little tool on the end of that scope that just kind of clips a little piece of tissue. Yeah. We send that off to a pathology lab and they can determine many different things or rule out many different things just from that little piece of tissue.
So that's kind of relieving, but I think listeners, you start thinking biopsy, am I going to hurt when I wake up? And pretty much oblivious to it from that standpoint. Yeah. So I think that listeners would be interested in, we talked earlier about how maybe it can be scary to think about being in a clinical trial and what that involves. So I think it might be a good idea if you could take our listeners through what happens from kind of the word go. And a lot of times go is that they've clicked on a advertisement banner, and the advertisement banner's taken them to our computer system and they entered in some of their contact information.
Right, let's say you're on Facebook and you see something pop up for a gastroparesis trial in your area. And you think, this ad has some symptoms listed: nausea, abdominal pain, feeling full all the time, bloating. And you think, that kind of describes what I've been dealing with for a couple of years now, and nobody can tell me what's going on. And so you click on it and it takes you directly to our website, to the page for that specific study. And there's a brief description of the study there, but it is also going to ask for your contact info, your name and phone number or email address. And that comes directly to our database. But we will send you an initial contact from our pre-screeners that says, hey, I see that you were interested in our gastroparesis trial. Is there a good time that we can talk? And I can tell you about the trial. We're going to let you know as much as we can let you know about the trial, answer any questions that you might have. How long will it last? How long will I be required to come see you? How many visits do I need to come see you? What are you going to do at my visits? Tell me about the medication that they're studying. Is it being compared to a placebo? We go through all of the ins and outs of the study up front so that you can make an informed decision on whether or not you're interested or not. Mm-hmm. You may say, I've really only had nausea for a few days now, so this may not apply to me, and I may not want to go through all of that. But for somebody that thinks, this they could be onto something, figuring out what's going on with me. Or I already know I have gastroparesis and nothing that I'm using to treat my symptoms is fixing it and nothing's really helping anymore. So here's an alternative. And let's see what this study's all about. We're going to tell you all about it. And then we're going to ask you lots of questions. We're going to want to know the basics. How tall are you? How much do you weigh? What's your date of birth? And then we're going to go into tell me about your symptoms. Tell me about how severe your symptoms are, how often you experience them. Have you ever had an EGD before? Have you had a colonoscopy before? Do you have records of those that can tell you what they found, get some background on this patient and kind of go from there, because we have a list of criteria for every study that we do that the patients have to meet, and then a list that patients can't meet. So we have inclusion criteria, we have exclusion criteria. So up front in the initial conversation, our pre-screeners do a great job of getting as much information as the patient can give and telling them all about the study, and then kind of cross-checking. Does this patient fit into this study based on their history, based on their medications, based on the severity of their symptoms? There are many different factors.
And the pre-screening effort and determining a fit for a study, that's not for our benefit. That is for the safety of the volunteer subject.
Absolutely.
It is our job to make sure that it is safe for someone to volunteer in a clinical trial. So we ask a lot about their other medical conditions as well, too. Over the years, kind of one of the things that surprised me is how many times someone might contact us about a study. They might contact us about a gastroparesis study, and it turns out maybe they don't have that, but we find out that they have some pretty bad migraine headaches. And all of a sudden we switch over and we discover they might be interested and more suitable for a migraine headache trial, or they might have sleep apnea, or they might have insomnia, or they might have any number of other medical conditions that we do clinical trials on. So we try to not just screen somebody for this particular clinical trial, but we're interested in developing a long-term relationship with that subject, not only with them, but also with their family. And I guess the other thing that surprised me over time, and you made reference to this earlier, is how often we might see grandma, and then we see grandma's daughter, and then we see the daughter's kids over a decade period of time. And that's kind of a rewarding thing as well, too.
It is. We're blessed to be able to have such an eclectic mixture of trials that we can do with all of our physicians, and their different backgrounds and specialties. And that works well for our patients.
Sure does. We've got about 16,000 roughly volunteers now that who I've worked with. And so always interested in learning about and meeting new people who might be interested in our trials. So as we're going through this clinical trial, and I'm a volunteer subject, and I've been screened, and it looks like so far that I've met all the criteria to where it's worth my time as a volunteer participant, but also the site's time and effort for me to come in and guess what? Undergo further screening.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit more about what that first visit might be like? What's the very first thing someone does before they even participate in a trial?
Yeah. So if you are interested and you want to schedule an appointment with me, we will do that. We'll get you to come in when it's convenient for you. We get you in there, and first thing we do is give you an informed consent. So that is a document that explains the study in detail. It is directed to the patient. So it's, it speaks in lay terms, to the patient so that they can understand what it is that they are signing up for, how the length of the study. It's gonna go over all of the things that we have talked about, but very informative in detail. We may miss something, and it's going to be in that informed consent. It's going to tell you all about it, the length of it, the amount of visits, what we're going to do at these visits. And so the participant is going to read through that. They're going to say, yep, I understand, and I'm willing to go forward. And so they're going to sign off on that. we are also going to do our part and sign off on that. They take a copy of that home with them in case they ever need to refer it. And then, they've got our contact information at that point. We can always go over any questions or concerns throughout their participation. If anything changes while they are participating, as far as the assessments that we do at visits, if the pharmaceutical company says, well, we want to make some minor changes, then a new informed consent comes out and it goes to that patient. And they're informed of any changes that might take place.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that we do.
Sometimes our studies have a lot of changes.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah. That informed consent document is going to talk with the subject about any potential side effects from the study. It's going to emphasize to them that they're a volunteer from that standpoint. There has to be some component of altruism in participating in the study, like I would like to do this in part for the greater good. But pharmaceutical companies all recognize that when someone's a volunteer participant in one of their clinical trials, that there's time and effort that goes into that, away from family and away from job, gas, travel, et cetera. So the informed consent form will also talk about what compensation is available to the subject for participation in the trial as well, too, right? Yeah. Right. And sometimes that changes. Sometimes pharmaceutical company, based off feedback from the site, will say, well, we're going to increase compensation because we're asking more of the subjects in this particular area than what we anticipated. So, so my informed consent form is signed and I've got it. And
we've gone over all the questions and Another important part of informed consent, I'm leaving out my role and Dr. Baber's role and Dr. Brown's role, which as principal investigator, we're responsible for the safety of the subject. And I always tell people that's my whole role in this study. I'm responsible for your safety and welfare as you go through this trial and to make sure we get good quality data. And that's it. But it's also an opportunity to speak with the principal investigator and ask questions of the principal investigator, or at times I'm a sub-investigator, to make sure that there's an opportunity to talk with the physician about participating in the clinical trial as well. So once that's done, now what? Well, what happens now
during that
we're
visit?
going to, and I'm going to tell you before we do anything, we're gonna do some assessments. So we're gonna make sure that everything looks good today. We're gonna check your blood pressure, and we're gonna make sure that looks good. And if it doesn't, then we're gonna have a conversation about it. We're gonna go over your medical history that I've already gotten from you and make sure, did you take your blood pressure medicine this morning? Because I see that you have a diagnosis of hypertension and you're on whatever medicine. And so we're going to kind of have a conversation. And if needed, we're going to call Dr. Baber in there, or we're going to call Dr. Wylie in there, and we're going to further that conversation and check it again, make sure that piece looks good. Once we're done with that, we're going to do things like an EKG. We're going to check the electrical rhythms of your heart. Make sure there's nothing going on there. We want to rule out anything serious so that we know you are safe, because this is an investigational trial. And although we're not to the point of you being on the investigational product yet, you've got to be, safe even through these assessments to get to that point. So we're going to draw your labs. We're going to check sometimes a lot of labs. Every pharmaceutical company has their own set of required tests that they want. We're going to collect your labs. We're going to collect even a urine sample. We're going to check for any type of infection, or in diabetics, we're going to make sure that your glucose isn't, too high and spilling out into your urine.
So those labs are going to check to make sure someone's liver's okay.
A lot of times we're checking liver enzymes.
Thyroid's okay. Is your blood count okay?
Your blood count.
And sometimes we check very specific hormones or other tests that qualify somebody for study. Sometimes there's some genetic testing in these studies that are done too, right?
Yeah. A lot of times. Sometimes they're optional. So in that consent form that you sign in the beginning, and we go over all of this, there are certain places where you can opt in to maybe providing this one extra sample. at this visit. And that's something that's an extra piece of information for the pharmaceutical company to look at how this medicine may affect your genetics versus how it might affect somebody else's genetics. And so that's a possibility in a lot of our trials. We're going to check, many different things, clotting factors, are you at risk for a blood clot down the road? We're going to look at all of that, keep you safe. And a lot of times alert to things that you had no idea about, because we do those assessments at every visit when you come in, and versus going to see your PCP once a year, if something. Yeah.
That's another surprise.
Yeah.
And it's a satisfying thing that by being in a clinical trial, I can't tell you how many times we have found a problem that somebody has that they don't know they have. And so I sit down with them and say, hey, I think you need to go talk with your primary care doc about this first. Not safe for you to participate in the study. It might be in a few months, but we need to go deal with this particular problem first. And boy, we find that all the time.
Yeah.
And the genetic testing, we're looking to see genetically, I guess, if someone's liver can handle the drug, or maybe it handles it too well. Some people metabolize certain drugs really fast, or they don't metabolize them hardly at all. And we don't want those folks participating from a safety standpoint or from an effectiveness standpoint. But the genetic testing also, it would be nice to get to a point in the practice of medicine for all of us. If we could draw somebody's blood, submit the blood for some genetic testing, and based off that genetic testing, we would say, well, of the 7 different drugs available to treat this condition, genetically, this is going to be the best one for you. And so ahead of time, we already know what drug might be best for somebody versus the trial and error process that we as physicians have to go through often to find what medicine works best for somebody for their condition. So the genetic testing can be pretty important. We're doing that in kids too, right? As well as adults. And, we hadn't talked about this, but you might mention a little bit, and then we'll continue on with our appointment process. But can you talk about what pediatric GI trials we've done and what it's like working with kids?
Yes, we have. We've done a few pediatric reflux trials. And those, these conditions can start at any age, so there are lots of pediatrics that are out there suffering and that will suffer, long term if a medication is not found for them that fits them, like you said, which could come in. The genetics testing can really come in handy because they're suffering. They have, all of the same conditions that adults have. Migraines. They have migraine headaches. We see a lot of kiddos with migraines. ADHD. Lots of pharmaceutical companies are trying to provide options to help these kiddos with all of these conditions. Other than GERD, let's see, or reflux disease for pediatrics, we don't see a lot of pediatric gastroparesis trials.
Maybe some constipation.
But I think we will.
Trial.
There are constipations.
Yeah. Kids
notoriously have, a faulty diet, as do some of us adults. But constipation trials for sure.
Yeah. That's one thing the FDA, in terms of clinical trial and development of new pharmaceuticals, I think has really done a lot better over the last decade, which is insist that the pharmaceutical companies, once their medication is FDA approved in adults, well, that's all fine and good, but we've got kids and teenagers that have the problem, but yet it's not tested in them. And so the FDA has been insisting that the pharmaceutical companies then do clinical trials in different age groups.
Right.
Because otherwise physicians are left using these medications, what we call off-label, which sometimes we have to do and need to do, but we'd prefer not to do it. We'd prefer to have a tested product from that standpoint. So, okay, so anyway, we're in the screening visit, and we've asked a bunch of questions, and we've drawn blood work and done an EKG, all things for safety. What else might occur during that initial visit?
So now that your blood pressure, your EKG, all of that looks pretty good, we're going to get your lab results back in probably 2 to 3 days, and we'll go over those when I get them. We're going to go through a physical exam with one of our providers, and a lot of the times that's you. You come in and you meet our patients or see patients that you've already met, and we'll do a physical exam. Make sure nothing stands out while you're talking to them and gathering information. Even while you're looking, you're listening and, gathering information, and you can find out a lot just from a simple physical exam. So we're going to get that done. You're going to assess everything and make sure they look good to continue. And maybe this study that they're screening for has a symptom diary. So that is typically an app that they can download on their phone these days. That's how most of them are done. So we're going to go through that process, and I'm going to show you the app. We're going to download it. We're going to get you set up with your user ID and password. You're going to talk about your symptoms on this diary. Like, let's say for gastroparesis, the trial that I have right now has a daily diary. And every evening, the participants are going to go in and it's going to say, did you have any nausea over the last 24 hours? And you're going to say yes or no. If you say yes, it's going to prompt, well, how severe was it on a scale of 1 to 5 or 0 to 5? And it's an every 24-hour thing. So
it reminds them to do that, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
there are notification alerts, which is easier with these apps.
I would need those.
Yes, absolutely. And so we go over kind of all of that. What's your routine? Do you want to do this right before you go to bed? Do you want to do it after supper? After the evening news, whatever is best for them. You can set an alarm. You can utilize the app notifications, because compliance is key. So we want to encourage the participants to report their symptoms in the diary. If we don't get enough of that information, we can't calculate whether or not their symptoms meet the eligibility, or whether or not, let's say you're in the treatment period down the road, you're still reporting your symptoms. We don't know if it's working for you without that information.
Yeah, have to get a good baseline of
that's right.
How bad is this for you, and how is it impacting your social and occupational functioning, your daily quality of life. Then give you the medication, and then part of the approval process is how much of a change in quality of life did this medication make for you over the course of the study?
Right. Yeah. And the symptom diaries are very often an endpoint for the pharmaceutical companies. That's how they know, that their product is helping. It's how we get to a new medication, is by knowing that it helped all these thousands of participants. It's generally very easy to use. It doesn't take but a minute or two to answer the questions.
I am an impatient volunteer because I feel miserable.
Yeah.
So how long does it take before I might be able to get exposed to the investigational medication? Yeah. Yeah,
sometimes it can take a few weeks to several weeks, depending on what assessments need to be done. We may need to do a colonoscopy. We may need to schedule that, get the results from that. These things can take a little time, but that is for your safety. There's a period of time where we have to do several things to make sure that you're going to be safe. Then we get to the treatment period, and we just have to be patient. It's for a good reason. It's for a good reason.
So I've gone from my screening period, and all of a sudden it's med day.
Yeah.
So kind of what happens on med day, so to speak. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you come in for that particular visit, and let's say we are what we call randomizing into a trial that has an active medication and a placebo. And maybe there's one dose of the active medication, or maybe they're looking at 2 different doses. So there are different variations of that in each trial. But we're going to enter you into the system for that study, and it randomly assigns you to active or placebo medication. And usually, a lot of times, we don't know, because we want it to be unbiased. We don't want, I can't sit behind the scenes like the Wizard of Oz and pick and choose. My favorite patients get these, Right. And so it's randomized, and that's across the board with all research. You want it to be unbiased. And we're going to take your first dose of medication that day, whether that's an oral pill or an infusion, or kind of like a needle prick with like an insulin pen would be, and we're going to monitor things, make sure it's okay.
So when you talk about randomization, there's a lot of different kinds of randomization that pharmaceutical companies will use. And it's not just the pharmaceutical company, it's the FDA requiring the randomization. So sometimes you get a study where there's placebo, 1 dose of medicine, a low dose, and a high dose of medicine. Sometimes you get studies where someone's on placebo first, but then without being told, somewhere during the middle of the study, they might end up switching to a low dose or a high dose of the medicine. Some people start out on the medication, and again, without being told, maybe in the middle of the study, they might get switched to placebo from that standpoint. And then we have some studies where, regardless of whether on placebo or the medication, where there's what we call an open-ended trial, where people are guaranteed to be exposed to the medication product, sometimes for up to a year, which can be a really nice benefit of being in a clinical trial, of being on a medicine and getting it free for a year while being monitored for safety by a physician more closely than what your primary care or other doc might even do. So a lot of different randomization from that standpoint. And then you talked a little bit about bias, that in clinical trials, really ethically, we try and avoid. That doesn't help safety. If I come back in for my first follow-up visit and you're there and you say, "So, John, how great have you felt taking this medication for the past 2 weeks?" John may or may not have felt great, but gosh, she expects me to feel great. So all of a sudden, my report may have changed, from that standpoint. I don't want to disappoint Jessica, so I'll tell her, well, I've done pretty good, where, maybe I've been miserable. So we have to be very careful as ethical clinical researchers not to inject bias or influence by positive or negative expectations into a follow-up appointment. So tell us a little bit about more about follow-up appointments. After someone's been on, you gave me the medicine, I'm happy. Yeah, I've taken it for a couple weeks. Now what happens?
Everything's going well. Well, you're going to come back for probably several more appointments with me, where we're going to do all of the same assessments that we've done before. We're going to check your blood pressure. Now that you're on a potential active medication, we're going to make sure it's not causing any changes in your blood pressure, in your heart rate, on your EKG, in your rhythm of your heart. Dr. Wylie or Dr. Baber, or we have Dr. Jensen there, they're going to do a physical exam, make sure nothing has changed since the last physical exam before you started medication. And if we see changes, we document those. We want the pharmaceutical company to know about those. But our physicians, like you, Dr. Baber, we are assessing. If we think, okay, is this expected with this? Have they seen this in previous trials with this medication? And we know that this could be expected. Or is this just a one-off and we don't think it's unrelated? We want to assess all of that so that the pharmaceutical company knows every single thing that's happened with every single participant across the globe, because that's their job, is to tally all those things up if they occur and make the future patients aware of it.
Yeah, a good example. Someone comes in and, I might be looking at their forearm and I'm like, well, how long have you had this red patch on your forearm? Oh, well, I didn't really pay any attention to that. Have you had some exposure to the great outdoors, or might this be from the medication? I've been a little sleepier than normal over the past couple of weeks. Well, that's kind of an expected effect as your body adapts to the medicine, but the red spot on your arm really probably isn't. And gosh, I bumped my, foot into the end of the bed. And so as I'm examining their toe, they wince and I'm like, what happened there? And they're like, oh, I bumped my toe. So we report all these. And, the reason it's reported, even the bump on the toe, which, everybody bumps their toe on the bed. Well, lo and behold, 3 months later, reports start coming in from Belgium and Canada and the UK and Germany and Japan and everywhere else that we've had 15 people bump their toe on the end of the bed. And so we really rely on the participants to tell us everything that has happened medically with them at that follow-up visit, even if it's insignificant, because we might start getting reports in from all over the world that, this has become a pattern from that standpoint. So that's where being a volunteer participant, it's really a partnership. We require or request that they partner with us and with the pharmaceutical company to be sure and report everything that might be going on with them. So I know during those follow-up appointments, you're asking them a lot of questions about all their different body symptoms from that standpoint. Yeah.
And we tell them up front, at that initial visit, while you're in this trial, if anything, if you change a medication, if your PCP increases a dose of your, let's say your hypertension medication, we want to know about that. We want to, number one, make sure that dose is safe. the lower dose might have been safe. We don't know about the higher dose. We need to know that, that changed. Or if you're put on a new medication, or if, you're diagnosed with a upper respiratory infection, you haven't even started the medication yet, maybe 2 weeks after your screening visit. But we want to know all of that because it all gets reported.
Or now you're on an antibiotic that you really probably shouldn't be taking this medicine with,
Right.
Your blood pressure's up, but hey, Jess, it's been a tough week at work for me this last week. I've been burning the candle at both ends, working some late hours. So I've been drinking a lot of Red Bull.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden we go from, is this medication causing an elevated blood pressure to, probably because you've been hitting the Red Bull. That's what's got your blood pressure up.
It's all in the details.
And so you don't want to disqualify medicines from a safety standpoint from being developed because of inaccurate information. So I think the point of emphasis here is, boy, we really, really make an effort at those follow-up visits to get a lot of detailed information about how people have been since we last saw them. So folks may have a number of follow-up visits, sometimes over 16 weeks, sometimes over a year, depending on the study from that standpoint. So what happens as the end draws near as we approach kind of the end of a clinical trial?
If the end of the trial is nearing us, and these participants are almost, let's say, at their end of treatment visit, there's going to come a visit where that's your last visit to take the medication in the study. In a perfect world, we would all have, open label extensions to all of these studies, but those are added into studies when they are generally confident that these are safe. They've been shown to be safe in previous trials. So at an end of treatment visit, when you are wrapping up your medication journey, we're going to continue to collect any changes, any symptom changes, increases or decreases. We're going to do another follow-up visit, if at least one, at the end of a trial, say a week or 2 weeks, or maybe even longer after you've been off of the medication, to make sure coming off of that medication or the length of exposure to that medication didn't cause any changes. So we're not done with you. We're going to follow you. We're going to make sure that you are exiting your participation just as safe as when you entered.
Exactly. Yeah. And part of that safety process means that one of my responsibilities as a principal investigator or a sub-investigator is to have some discussion with the volunteers as they're ending with, okay, what is our ongoing treatment plan? Do you have an appointment set up with Dr. Brown or Dr. Baber for follow-up care from that standpoint? What medication might you go back on from that standpoint? Hey, this medication that you helped test, by the way, is commercially available already. It's just not been tested in your age group. And so, you might think about asking your primary care doc to consider it. And those long-term trials, they are nice. And, they have a purpose. Often these trials might be 4 months or 5 months, but then you don't have any data as to what happens when someone takes this medicine for a year. Do they continue to get better? Does their improvement stabilize and they plateau? Or do they have some sort of problem that pops up after they've taken it for a year? Like, what if all of a sudden they develop a visual change a year out? And is that a normal visual change that a lot of us have after 1 year, right? Or gosh, might that be from the medication? So sometimes we'll follow up with, ophthalmology testing or suggestions or things like that. So again, all about safety. And then all about the connection. So, that last visit is kind of a big thank you, kind of a small celebration of all of our effort in the trial. We certainly make a lot of effort to work to have people continue to be our partners with us over time.
Yeah. At the end of a patient's participation, within all of the follow-up, we're going to suggest that if they were to do another clinical trial, there are requirements to have like a washout period is what we kind of call it. We want there to be a certain period of time after one investigational medicine is ended before you start on another one.
Absolutely.
You don't want to just, compact a bunch of investigational medicines. So that's a big one. And then we do a lot of the trials or a lot of the indications, conditions over and over. I've had, I don't know how many gastroparesis trials or migraine trials, ADHD trials, depression. If these patients are interested, then we tell them, well, I'm going to call you. I'll call you when I get a new trial. We say that all the time. And a lot of our patients are like, well, yeah, I want to help out,
Yep.
Call me when you have another one. And so some of these patients are lifelong, friends of ours because we've known them for years because they're dedicated to helping.
What else should a volunteer subject be aware of about participating in a clinical trial? I think it's important that they understand how important they are.
How important they are. They are important for sure. Because to me, they're helping the future. They're helping, future patients, even if they may not get the relief that they desire while they're in this trial. The end goal, the ultimate goal is to get a medication approved for the bulk of people, for everyone that might experience this. Mm-hmm. And so it is very, very important that, we take good care of them and we show our appreciation because they're doing a really big thing and making a really big difference.
We have a lot of people that are participating that are very scientifically interested in the medication and the compound and in the outcome of the study. Yeah. They might have a family member or they just have an innate curiosity. One of the things I've been happy about is the pharmaceutical companies making an effort to keep, I want to say, their volunteer subjects informed and engaged and educated about their compounds. And I think they're doing a better job of that.
I think so, because you didn't really see that several years ago. And that's what keeps patients or participants engaged is knowing what it was all for, Did I make a difference? Yeah. I have frequently been cooking dinner at, say, 6:30 in the evening. The evening news is on, and here comes 15 pharmaceutical commercials. That's the prime time of those commercials is in the evening. And it's really rewarding when you see one that you've worked on, but not so much for me, for those patients, for the volunteers if they see this commercial though, they don't always know that's the one that I did. A lot of times they don't have a name when they're still being investigated and they come up with a commercial name for it after the fact. But they do. They need to know that commercial they saw last Wednesday night was the one that they participated in. And if we can hand down some of that information when we get it, and I've done that before. You mentioned in the last podcast the Jamadi nasal spray. It's the Reglan or metoclopramide nasal spray. We worked on those trials, and since then I've had patients come in for another gastroparesis trial and been able to say, hey, this is an option. It's new, and I don't know how easy it is for you to get it from, your doctor, your pharmacy, with your insurance, whatever, but it's available. And we worked on that, and patients just like you helped bring that to fruition. And I think that's important for them to see that end piece, that to be engaged like that, to see what they're doing it for.
Yeah. Jessica, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
For sure. It's very much appreciated. Appreciate working with you. I'm interested in what you see from a coordinator standpoint, but also from where you see yourself being professionally. What's going to happen in clinical trials over the next 10 years for you personally, but just clinical trials in general? You see any trends out there?
Yeah, I do. I see a lot of these biologic medications, the infusions like you were talking about earlier. That's a big one right now. I think it's going to take off. I think neuropsych is going to take off. Immunology, working with autoimmune diseases that are so limited and limiting to the ones that are affected. I think there will be more and more a deeper dive into looking into those and how we can help and prolong not only life but quality life. Yeah.
Some of the research that's coming out, I think, in two areas in particular, I see us sneaking closer and closer to locating the underlying causes of Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
and either opening up the tau protein disposal pipeline that's in our brain, or detecting when we first develop overaccumulation of certain proteins in the brain long before symptoms ever develop, So I see us heading more toward prevention and the treatment starting to be used before the problem ever develops. And it's kind of strange to say, well, you're going to get on treatment before you ever develop a problem. But I think we're moving there, and we need to move there with the brain from that standpoint. I think that's important. And then so many different diseases and disorders now have a mental health component to them. Even our GI studies have a significant mental health component to them. We've had a lot of people come in pretty discouraged and depressed from their GI problem and how it's affected their life. But the whole area of psychedelic medications, I think, and what that may produce for treatment of not just mental health conditions, but of brain conditions. I think some of these compounds that can cause neuron regrowth. Very interesting. And
it's
someday,
fascinating.
I'd like to find the ability for us to regrow some of the nerve activity in the stomach to maybe help gastroparesis that way, from that standpoint. So maybe a way to block the effect of diabetes on some of the smaller nerves that make our stomach work properly. Wouldn't that be a great day?
We'd all
be pretty happy. So I look forward to working with you going forward in that effort. So thanks again. So that brings today's podcast to an end. And I think next time, be a good idea maybe to talk about some of our ulcerative colitis studies and teach people about that.
Sure.
And let them know what we've got going on out there in terms of clinical trials that they might be interested in participating in.
Okay.
So until then, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you.